And the guy the mailman handed me this paper, this envelope, and I opened it up, and it was Uncle Sam looking at me. I want you. And so Doris was there, and I talked to her about it, and she already knew that if when that happened, that there wouldn't be any way in the world you could keep me here. She wouldn't want me to. Well, you know, you understand what I'm saying? It isn't that we wanted to stay. It's just it's a hard thing to have a brand new wife and all that, and then go somewhere else. I had no choice. I went back from lunch and went over and resigned, and told my boss that I was very sorry, but I got this. And he said, "Well, you're doing war work, and we've already drafted, or what do you call it? Canceled your appointment with the military. You're doing work. You should be doing this work. It's war work." And he said, "We'd like you to stay here. It's no problem." I said, "No, I'm sorry about that. I love the work. I like the people, especially the Firestone people. They're really great people. They've done good by me, and I want to do right by them. And I'm leaving." And he said, "Well, okay, I understand what you're saying. And when you get where you're going, you let us know where you are, and you'll be receiving things from us all the time you're over there," which I was. I got everything. And I said to him at the time I left to go down there to the draft board and tell them I'm ready. They said, "You're not ready." I said, you got 14 or 15 days. You don't have to come in yet." And I said, "No, I'm not going to do this twice. I'm going now." So I went in that day, and I was always glad that I did, because it would really have bothered me if I had one brother over there for a long time, both of them younger than me, and one of them on the way over, and me over there. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't do it. Basic training, Fort McClellan, Alabama, and it was 6 months there. February and whatever, 6 months worked out. We did everything that they say that you're in the infantry training. You're doing everything here that you're going to do there, except one thing, and nobody's shooting at you, but you're going through the motions. Well, they try to stop that somehow, or to make it more real, by trying to get you to shoot at targets that are jumping out at you through the woods and things like this that they put up, and they'll pop up and you're supposed to shoot them before they shoot you. Well, they're not going to shoot you in that case, but that's a training that they give you. And it's the same way with bayonets. When you're trying to use a bayonet on a friend, it's a dangerous thing, because you're fighting. Actually, you're not, but you're supposed to be really fighting, because the next time you're going to use it, it'd be on somebody that was real. And so we had that kind of training. Also, I saw in there about the throwing of the grenades. When you're in the infantry, you have a bandolier across this way and across this way, and they're just, all these hand grenades are hanging on there. And one day, going through the woods, and they were doing a lot of shooting in this woods, and we didn't know where exactly they were coming from. And I hit the ground like everybody else did, and I thought to myself, I said, Joe, what's the matter with you? I said, you know, it doesn't matter where they hit me, I'm going to blow up. If they hit one of those hand grenades, you're gone anyway. And they're hanging all over you. And, but it's, and on there I noticed it said, did anyone get, did you lose anybody in training? And we had lost one man, and his name was Tunk. And it fit his name. He was a real character. So we were crawling underneath the. They have a wire that's up less than 30 inches off the ground, kind of a net that you're not supposed to raise up because they're shooting machine guns over the top of you, and you're crawling up this hill. And what it is, it's clay, and you're crawling, dragging your body that way. Full field pack on. Rifle, you can't get your rifle dirty while you're doing this. And he couldn't take it. He jumped up and they shot right through him. But that was the only one of our group that got killed. We had, at night, they'd send you out to see if you, now I'm talking about in training now, you send you out to see if you could find what the red people are doing. And they weren't supposed to see you, and you weren't supposed to let them see you. You get as close as you can and come back and say, this is what's happening. Well, one of the guys didn't come back. And it was in Fort McClellan, Alabama, and there's a lot of weeds and stuff that you're crawling around through, all that. And they couldn't find him. So when he didn't report back to the group that he was with, our captain said, well, we've got to go find him wherever he is. So we walked through those weeds that way up here. And he was sitting there just like he was before, just leaning down. He's just sitting there. A snake bit him and he couldn't move. And when we left down there, he was still in the hospital, and that was several weeks after that had happened. If you were going to choose something to be in, and you didn't like to just walk and be rough, infantry's not the place for you. It's a rough go. You don't have any. I noticed on that thing, where do you sleep at night? Wherever you are. On the ground, under the tree that has the most snow on it, and you dig under the snow and you get in there. And you wear, when it was snowing and the snow was heavy, we wore everything, and then a raincoat over the top of that. Well, that raincoat really helped you, because if you'd lie down in the snow and ice and all that kind of thing, without that it would have penetrated the cloth and so forth, and you wouldn't have been able to do it. But that's what we did, and if you found a place that was a building that was sound and everything, and it wasn't under fire already, like most of them were, because we were in the zone all the time where people were fighting. Well, you would go in and you'd sleep wherever you could, on the floor or wherever. And also you'd have to go to the bathroom all over the place, because there's nothing in there. We had to go through a beehive. Well, we went through an orchard, but there's beehives all over the place. And as we went through there, we were getting some fire from Germans that saw us running between the trees to the house. We got in the house, and there wasn't anything in there but a dresser and some other stuff like that. And that's where we had to go to the bathroom. And but you sleep wherever, on the floor. A bed wasn't in the thing at all. And I don't think we ever saw a bed while we were fighting. And we were sleeping wherever we were at the time. The shooting stopped long enough for you to get some sleep. I don't know. When I went overseas, and the first stop I made, and after they took us to the holding place, that was in Italy. I'm walking around there and I see how many soldiers are out there waiting to be assigned to a company. And I also noticed that there was a lot of chaplains, and they had signs on them, chaplain, that tell what church they belonged to. And I stopped one of them, and he said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I don't know that I need help, but I'm here now to be sent to somewhere else and join in and start fighting, and I know that. So are all these other people out here. We know we got a short time. We're right on the brink of starting to fire right then." And he said, "Have you got a problem?" I said, "Not really, but I'm not sure that my mother ever told me that I was baptized." And he told me, he said, "Well, if you'll bring a soldier with you to my tent in the morning, I'll baptize you." And he did that, and out of my helmet. Ross had been, before he came overseas, he had been issued by the president an award for capturing 2 Germans in a 2-man submarine in New York. And after he got over there, he was shot everywhere you could be shot, and every time he'd get in the hospital, they wanted to keep him there for a while. "No, I got to get back." So he just had all kinds of things wrong with him, with bullets everywhere. But he was a soldier, the best soldier that I ever heard of. He's really a great guy. It didn't mean anything to him if there was a whole bunch of people shooting at you, and he felt like he had to protect everybody, and that's probably why he got so many bullets in him, because he would try every way in the world to do that. And if he goes to the hospital, he went out of here, I want to go back to my unit, you know. Well, here we are, all of us at the hospital in somewhere in France, close to Paris, and he was there, and we were all up and around, but we couldn't go anywhere yet. And he met a girl who lived quite a ways away, and he borrowed, or he got a bicycle. I don't know where he got the bicycle, but he went over to the place where we ate there, and he told everybody liked the guy, and he told the guy in charge of the canteen or the place we were eating that he was going to see his girl, and would he give him some coffee. Well, the guy, sure, yeah, he gave him a box or a bunch of coffee. He got on a bicycle and rode over there, and it was about 20 miles or so. It's up close to Paris. And on the way, he was carrying this stuff on a bicycle, and it started raining. And the wheel slipped on a cobblestone street. Have you ever walked on a cobblestone street like this? You know? Well, that's ridiculous on a bicycle, because you're going like this all the time. Anyway, he broke the wheel on the bicycle, and he was sitting on the curb, and it was raining. He was just sitting there, and these guys stopped, picked him up, and took him into Paris, and put him in jail. Well, the next morning, our captain, he was wondering what had happened to him. Where is he? He got a call from Paris, and the jailer down there said, "We've got one of your men down here." And so our captain, his name would go all the way around. When you paint the name on the hat, it went all the way around it, Rodolowski or something like that. Went all the way around his hat, the captain did. And he said, he got the call, and it said, "We've got one of your men down here. He was drunk, and he was sitting there like a general with all these things on and everything." He says, "Oh, you have you? You got one of my men down there?" And he said, "Yeah." He says, the guy said, "I don't know his name. It's something like Rossi or Rosadi or something like that." And so our captain said, "I tell you what you do with him. You go by the Shafe headquarters and pick up Eisenhower, and you come down here, and by that time I'll have everybody here stand up, and there'll be a big formation, and you can make your little speech to this man. He's the best soldier in the world." That's the last we heard of that. They brought him home in style. We went into the Vosges Mountains, and the firing was all the time. It wasn't any let up. And when we got about halfway up to where we thought they were in that mountain, all of it stopped. And our captain said, "Well, hit the ground and fill up your ammo." He said, "This is a trick. It could be a trick." And he said, "But it's going to take us a while to get up there. We've been watching where the bullets are coming from." And he said, "So fill up your ammo, take your bayonet off and put it on the end of your rifle, tie a white handkerchief around it, because this is the last stop we're going to make. We're going up that mountain. They're firing and we're firing, so what?" And he said, "That's the way we're going, and we want to, when I give you the word, I want you to have your guns filled up and don't stop, going all the way." So we went up there, and we got about halfway up to where, or a little over halfway, to where these people, where the Germans had been firing from. And we went up as far as we could, and you could tell they'd been there. There was a hot machine gun up there, but there was no Germans there. And he said, "We're going to have to take a chance that they're not going to come back tonight." He said, "I know we didn't kill them all. So they're here someplace, and they know where we are." So he said, "I want you to get some rest. You've been fighting all day." And in the morning, at the first break of day, just coming through the sun was just barely coming through those trees. And he was around waking up, "Okay, get up, and get your ammo, and be sure you're filled up with ammo." And while he was doing that, all of us would get up, and I found that hole. I was looking down there, but there was one of our soldiers, a big tall guy, was standing over there, and he had his rifle, and he was getting the snow and ice off of it. And he was doing that. He was standing up, and he said, "Hey, look down there. There's people in American uniforms looking at us." And our captain said, "Hit the ground and start firing. Those are Germans in American uniform." And so we hit the ground, and the fighting went on from early in the morning till 5:30 in the afternoon. We had 20 people left when we got through. So we were standing there wondering what we're going to do now. The captain was gathering us around him. We were standing there trying to hear what he was trying to tell us. And a bunch of Nisi soldiers came through the woods. We didn't know they were there, but the captain knew they were there. They're American-born Japanese. and they were there to prove that they're good American people. And everybody really, the Germans were scared to death of them. They were really good fighters. They came in, and when we saw them, it really shocked us. The 20 of us that were standing there, my God, look at here, all these soldiers coming, we don't know who they are. Their captain walked right down there, and all of his people walked down and got around us. And their captain was telling our captain, I see you're ready to go, but he said, please don't do it. Let these men sleep some more. Our captain said, well, we know we haven't killed everybody over there, and they'll be back. He said, no, they won't. And he finally did decide, okay, that's what we'll do. But when we did that, we did rest that night, and they didn't bother us. They didn't come back. And we were looking for the captain had heard that there was a village, pardon me, if you look off to one side there was a village that the captain had been in officers' meetings where this person had fought in the Vosges Mountains. And he was telling the people that had not fought there, this is what you do, how you do it. And he said there's a village there, and we had to climb up a little bit higher, but not much. And when we got up there, we all saw the village down there, and he said all we could see was a long street, and it was on a cobblestone street, and then on both sides of that street were houses and stores stuck together all the way down. You couldn't run it through it this way. You had to go this way. And everything was small and compared to America. Their stuff was small. The housing and the stores and everything were small. We went down that, and it took us a long time to get down there because we were going down the snowy mountain, and we were sliding and slipping, and we got down there. There was we did see two Germans walking around with no helmets on before we started to go down there. By the time we got down there wasn't any. We didn't see anybody. So we got there, and the captain said, now, we had a 50 caliber machine gun with 2 men on it. It's a heavy gun. He set that right in the middle of the cobblestone street, and he turned around to me and he said, you got the light gun, and I had a guy carrying ammo with me. You take that gun and go down, and the ammo with you, go down to the end of the street, and one of the last houses on that street, you go into the house, go upstairs. They had a downstairs and an upstairs, but you go outstairs and go out, walk wood stairs on the outside to go upstairs. Just a 2-room deal, one downstairs, one upstairs. So I knocked on the door, and this guy opened the door. It was a Frenchman, little short guy about like that, and his wife was in there. And he couldn't speak our language. We couldn't speak to his. But he did this and invited us in. And then as soon as we got in there, the house wasn't very big, not any bigger than where we're sitting here. And he looked over there and pointed at his wife was cooking something, stew on a stove. And she was standing there. She looked just like him. And she was standing stirring this stew. And he tried to motion to us to tell us things. And he motioned to her, and she came over and stood by him by the door. And that's kind of funny when I thought about it later, because you know, here in a foreign country, different people, and you just go through their house, do whatever you want, you know. Well, anyway, he and his wife were standing there at the door, and as they were going out, he yelled and he pointed, stuck his hand out like that, and said, "Bosh!" And he said it twice, real loud. He went on out. I didn't know what Bosh meant, neither did the soldier with me. at that time. We didn't know what it was. As soon as they left, we went outside, went upstairs, set the gun up in the window, my gun. Came downstairs and took off our shoes and socks, poured the water and ice out, and we laid them on top of that stove. And we found some little dishes like a cup with the handle broke off, that kind of thing. We were sitting there eating that stuff. It was good. God, it was good. And a runner from the captain came in, and he said, we've got to go back up in the mountains and meet out in front. The captain wants us out there. He said, the Germans fired an 88 down the middle of that cobblestone street and killed those 2 soldiers in the middle of the street with the 50 caliber gun. Now, we had 20, now we got 18. Now, we finally made our way up to the top of the mountain, and it was snow sliding back and falling and slipping, and he told us, he said, it's going to be a rough deal. We got to get back to the first road in that mountain. There's several roads around there. We got to get to the first one, so I can get somebody to come and pick us up and take us to where we need to go. So and he said, everybody hang on to the guy in front of you. And he said, now, I mean to hang on to him. Don't let go of him, but we don't want to lose any more men. And he said, I'm going to lead you, and I'm going to fall into some creeks and break through the ice and stuff, and I'll pull somebody else in. Don't let go. Just everybody will do it. And that happened. We walked through all that, broke through the ice, fill up your boots again, going on up there, and the guy was hanging on to you, but I had my gun sticking over. I had one man behind me, and that end of that gun, when I fell in, he fell in, and it hit him right across there and just split his head open. And he couldn't do anything about it. They wrapped a handkerchief around it real quick, and it was dark. We couldn't even see. He knew it was running blood. But we got to the first road that he could figure was a road, because it was too dark to tell, but there wasn't any trees on it. And he found this building. He saw the shadow of a building. He thought it was a barnyard building of some kind, and when we all got up there, he said, I want you to go look at that, and if it's big enough for 18 of you to get in there. And we went over and felt it. You couldn't really tell what it was. So we got inside. He said, you may be sitting in something, but sit wherever you can, but lean up against the wall and relax. And all of us went in there and did that. How he got a hold of somebody to come and get us, none of us ever knew. Because a truck came up there, and it took about an hour after we were in there. He came in, stuck his head inside this crack of the door, and it was still real dark. And he yelled, the truck is here, and there's 3 men out here, and they want you to get up and get in the truck. He turned around and walked away. Of course, I don't know, all this stuff was pitch dark. He had a little tiny light, like most people use for key lights that you carry on the keys chain, something like that. We never saw him use it, but he used it in there. He came in and he looked at us, and we were all sitting there holding on to our legs. And he said, oh my God, every one of you got trench foot. We couldn't move. 18 of us.
I carried 200 rounds of ammunition. We had a cartridge belt on that we carried in, and we had bandoliers that hang across you. They give you 2 bandoliers, and that was 200 rounds. And I was a grenadier. What a grenadier is, I carried an M1 rifle, and I had a grenade launcher on the end of my barrel. And you'd when you empty your rifle, you'd put a blank shell in there and put that grenade on that thing and shoot it off. So you go. I had plus I had 4 hand grenades and 6 rifle grenades in the bag, plus my gas mask, plus the shovel you dig in with, and that was a load right there. You carried and you pack on top of that. Now I'm telling you, you had a load. Your feet play out on you, your knees and everything else. And usually when we went to attack, well, not usually, every time we went to attack, we'd drop a pack off and you'd run because you're going across open fields, and that had to keep off the artillery off of you. And then the artillery you'd have a fire going, they'd shell your artillery, and then they'd shell you all the time. If you get out your foxhole and get running around, you could hear that artillery coming around, and it was rough. I mean, you had to stay on your thing, and every time you move up, I mean, positions, like you was in attack, and you could move up in a position, when you hit the ground, you start digging your foxhole. They didn't tell you. Nobody had to tell you. Because at the foxhole, you wouldn't get it 6 inches deep, and they counterattack, but that 6 inches would save your life. And I ain't no telling how many holes I started and have to leave out. I mean, we get them about dug, and we're moving out. We'd get up and move, but nobody gripe about it, because that's the only way you get back is take care of yourself and dig that foxhole and follow orders. I always did that. It was a hill that we were supposed to take, and they were a trench running the bottom of that hill all the way around that thing, and the Germans was in it. And so we got, it was dark in, and they opened fire on us, and Lieutenant, or platoon sergeant said, fix bayonets and charge. So we put on bayonets and we charged, took off up through there, and my squad leader was killed. The German got him with a burp gun, hit him in the air to come right on up and knocked him back. He was from Maine. His name was Jacobs, and he died. He carried a Tommy gun, and we went on up and started up its draw. And they, after we took it, we jumped in there on them, and bazooka man shot this German in the face and knocked his nose off when we jumped in the thing. So they started counterattacking in, and all the machine guns was up on the end I was in. So and they was firing at us too, across the fair. You could see tracer bullets coming across. So we laid down the trench, and they walked over us going down to the other end of the trench where they could take a machine gun down, instead of getting out. So that's when we got that out, and then we started on up top of the hill. Well, we got about halfway up the hill, and they throwing artillery on us, and had arrow busts. They hit the trees, and the shrapnel would rain down on you like a rain. Man, you could hear it hitting all around you. And a little piece about like a needle hit me in the thumb. That cast iron, it splinter all over bad, and I pulled it out. It didn't mount nothing, but went on. And we got up there and we took his heel, and so we dug in, and I dug a foxhole over by myself, and my buddy from up in Kansas, Cunningham, a BR man, he dug a foxhole. Next morning they counterattacked us, and I hollered over at him. He couldn't see out. He dug all night. He had the hole so deep he couldn't shoot out. He had to pull dirt back at the hole. And anyway, they counterattacked us, and they were machine gun on my right, and then on down a little bit further there was another machine gun. They got them in a crossfire and they got all the Germans except one, and he took out running, and I was nervous and stuff, and I shot at him 24 times and never did hit him. I shoot my rifle 8 times and reload it, another time 8, another time 8. And so next morning went back to chow, and the lieutenant said, "Hey, Batson," said, "did you hear about that German that captured?" I said, "No, what about him?" He said, "Had both shoe heels shot off." I said, "Well, I guess that was me." We took a town at night, and we went in this town, and I was a first scout, second scout, but another boy was first scout, and we were throwing hand grenades in the basements of the town. So he threw the hand grenade in, it didn't go off, he threw another one in the gun. So we went on up through there and we took his town, and so he got wounded, so I went back to see him for it, and they had an aid station set up in the basement down there, and I went down in there to see him. He said, "Here's them 2 hand grenades I threw in there." He never had pulled a pin out of it. He had filled them in, never had pulled a pin out, see. We lived off the land up there. We'd cook rabbits and chickens and ducks and stuff like that. So I was out there skinning rabbits to eat, and I looked up, and a bunch of tanks come across up on top of the hill, and they were American tanks. And so a lieutenant come down in a Jeep. He said, "What y'all doing here?" I said, "Lieutenant, we took this last night." He said, "I'm supposed to take it in the morning." I said, "Well, something wrong somewhere." I said, "We got in here last night." And he said, "I was getting ready to shell this town. I seen you out here cleaning rabbits." And I said, "Well, something wrong." So he checked with the lieutenant, and he had got lost and went to the wrong place. See, that was the 8th Infantry Division up there in those tanks. We started digging in, and the ground was so wet that you had to dig sod up and sod up your hole around you. And there was a house nearby there, and I sodded up a hole and got the shutters off of it and put it across the top and put dirt on top of it. Well, they counterattacked us and started throwing artillery, and I was up in my hole there, had my back end sticking out, and a piece of shrapnel, which I still got it in this case, hit me back on the hip, and I reached back there, and it was still hot. It kind of burnt me a little bit, and I still got that piece and brought it home with me. But I know my feet froze, and I went to the doctor back on sick call, and he said, "Your feet's froze." And I said, but he said, "You hadn't got frostbite yet." I said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And he said, "You going to send me back?" And he said, "Son," said, "if I send everybody back, after up there during the buds," he said, "if I sent everybody back with frozen feet, it wouldn't be nobody on the front lines up here." He said, "Everybody's feet froze. It was that cold. I mean, it was miserable." And back in, I didn't smoke, and still don't smoke. And the boys say, "Batson, were you on cigarette?" And I said, "No, I don't want to." I said, "I'm not nervous enough yet." So one time we was in a big battle. We got in this town, and the Germans got shooting at us with 20mm ack, and you could look down the street. If you could be laying on the ground, you could lit a cigarette with tracer bullets going across the street. About that many there. And so we got all that settled out, and the boy say, Batson, you on cigarette? And I said, no, I'm not nervous enough. And he said, what in the hell is it going to take to get you nervous enough where you smoke a cigarette? And I said, I don't know. So anyway, they gave us cigarettes, and I had to get a good brand of cigarettes to give mine away to the boys. And I swapped them cigarettes for chewing gum. I chewed double mint chewing gum and get very much chewing gum. And I'd go for a couple a day with the same gum, even sleep with it in my mouth because you couldn't get it, and I'd chew that gum. Really, you got to be up there a long time before you find out anything about anybody, because if you get attached to somebody and when they get killed, it's like you losing one of your members of your family now. You got to be there to understand it, what I'm talking about. See, because I'm telling you true, when a good friend of you get killed, you cry it like it one of your family, because you slept together and then foxhole together and eat together. Last time they send one meal up there and both of you eat out the same mess kit. I mean, you know, if one guy'd go back and eat, he'd bring two meals up in one mess kit, and you'd eat it like that, see. And when I was a first scout and got in this town and walking along there, and this German halted me. And the guy behind me was trying to talk German to him. Well, he threw a potato masher out there, you know, which is what we call a German hand grenade. It's about that long, and it's got a thing look like a can on the end of it, about like a small mater can, with a handle, and on the end of that wooden handle, it's got a cap you screw off. It's got a little porcelain ring in there, and you pull that ring, well, you start that going, and it'll go off in a minute. And so he threw that out there, and I emptied my rifle at him, and I hit the ground while I was shooting at the German with an empty that shot at him 8 times. I hit the ground, and when that grenade went off, it knocked my helmet off. Well, I was trying to find my helmet, and about that time, the German tank started up, and it came at me, and I rolled over. I had found my helmet all that time, and I rolled over, keep it running over me, and then I got in my grenade bag and got me a rifle grenade out there about that long, and in the end of them is a blank shell. Got a little piece of tape over it. I pulled that piece of tape off and got that blank shell, and my rifle was already empty, so I put it in the barrel of my rifle and put that grenade on the end of it. And when it got, I guess 40 feet from me, I shot it in the back and set it on fire and knocked it out. And the Germans coming out that was in there, what it didn't kill in the thing. So the lieutenant told me, he said, I'm going to turn you in for the Bronze Star. It was rough over there, and yeah, and when after I got orders to go back to front, I really didn't want to go, because I'd been up there with them boys, and you know, you get attached to them. I thought, man, and this old boy come there, he told me, he said, I know how you feel. He said, he done been back, and he sent him back up there. He said, you don't want to go. And I said, no, I really don't. He said, well, you need to. He said, you're going to mess around and get killed. He said, it may be over with before I had to go. And so I went back in. But really, I did. It was dangerous up there, and you liable to get killed any minute. But you hated to leave. It get in your blood. We had some boys that you get in a town, they start out hunting like you get out and go squirrel hunting. They hunting somebody to shoot. I mean, it's bad that way, but they they train that way. When we took basic training, they had signs up all over the fort down there at McCullough, kill or be killed, kill or be killed. And they'd show you films at night, cutting people's throats and stuff like that, getting behind the lines and all that kind of stuff. They show him before you go to bed at night, processing you, and they tell you, say, now we can't make you kill nobody, but we're going to put you in a situation, if you don't kill somebody, you're going to get killed. And they dang sure made that word good, because you got over there and you either going to kill somebody or you going to mess around and get killed now. And it was that way.
I'm James D. Beall, and I was born in September the 5th of 1919 in Jacksonville, Arkansas. My father was a farmer by trade. At the same time, he bought cattle and fattened them and salted them and carried the beef to North Little Rock and provided beef and pork to the stores, grocery stores that is, in North Little Rock, as well as a route that he had personal customers. He carried meat to them. We delivered meat to the parents of my first wife. At the time we visited them, she was only a few months old. I remember her mother bringing her out to the truck to pick up the meat that my father was taking to them. So that was kind of an interesting thing that I never failed to forget. My father died later that year in December of 1927 at the age of 49. So his passing left me without any parents. My mother died at my age of 6. She was only 33. She had tuberculosis. So my uncle and aunt became my legal guardian and took me in along with my 3 sisters. Otherwise, we would have lost our home and everything. My dad was, I considered him ahead of the time for the rural sections of Arkansas. He set up a Delco system which provided electricity to the home and to the barns, and we had running water in the house, which was uncommon for anyone in the local rural area at that time. Later on, Rural Electric Association, REA, put in electricity in the mid to late 30s. So that was something I'll always remember about my dad. I don't know what education level he had, but he was a brilliant man by his enterprise and doing things that made the family as comfortable as possible. I went to school at Sylvan Hills Elementary School, and we rode school buses from our home to the school, and my foster father built the body for the school bus because there was no Ward's school bus factory to build the metal buses, and we rode to school and back in those homemade buses that had seats parallel to the chassis of the truck, and he'd pick up the students and carry them to school and let them out, and pick them up again in the afternoon. When it came to the 7th grade, the county school system ran out of money. This was in the early 30s during the Depression. Those children who had influential parents adequately to pay tuition continued to go to school, but those who did not have the money had to stay at home. So it took me 2 years to go through the 7th grade through no fault of my own. And so went ahead and finished the 9th grade, and at that time my foster father told me there was no money to send me to high school at the 10th grade, beginning 10th grade in North Little Rock. They didn't have the high school in Sylvan Hills, so that meant they had to be bused to North Little Rock. Well, that didn't sit too well with me, so when I became 16 years of age, by the time I got out of the 9th grade and I couldn't go on to school, I left home. And I went to a dairy farmer about 4 miles from my home, and they were needing somebody to milk their cows and work at the dairy. My cousin had just decided to take on something else, so he left the job and I moved into it. During my senior year, I had a bunch of friends that belonged to a National Guard outfit, and they said, "Denzel, come on and join up with us." Said, "If we get called to active duty, we'll be in the same outfit and we'll take care of each other." It was imminent that the war would between the United States and the rest of the world, that almost was coming up, and so I joined the National Guard outfit. It was 153rd Infantry, headquarters detachment of the 1st Battalion, and okay, about a week later, Uncle Sam says, "We're going to take you into active duty." That duty at the base out there at Camp Robinson was something different, in my opinion, because it was my first experience with the military. We had a rifle range for pistols and rifles, and there also had ranges where we tossed grenades. We'd pull a pin and count to 10 so it wouldn't give the enemy time to throw it back at us. I saw a notice on the bulletin board one day, and it says, "Anybody interested in transferring to the Army Air Corps, sign up here." I signed up, and several others signed up. However, the battalion general decided he was losing too many men, and I was one of 9 that was allowed to transfer before the stop was put on transferring others to the Army Air Corps. So that was about 5 months of basic training at Camp Robinson. Having been selected for a transfer, I was transferred to Jefferson Barracks, Missouri. And we stayed there for about 2 weeks, awaiting further assignment to schools or whatever. And I was chosen to go to Rantoul, Illinois, where Chanute Field was a mechanics training school for airplane mechanics. This bulletin board showed up again. And anyone interested in pilot training, sign up here. Hey, that sounds pretty good. So my 3 buddies and I signed up for pilot training. And I went ahead and finished the school at Chanute, which was a 6 months course. I went up there in May and finished in November, late November. And I was on my way to Randolph Field, Texas, which was going to be my next assignment, but I had a delay en route that allowed me to come through North Little Rock. And my girlfriend, of course, attracted my eye, and I invited her out to a movie one Sunday afternoon. It happened to be December the 7th, 1941, and we were sitting in there enjoying the movie when suddenly the PA system came on, and it said, all military report to your duty stations immediately. So that meant the beginning of the conflict with Japan. That's when Pearl Harbor occurred. So it was quite a blow. Went home and got my bags packed and went to Randolph Field, Texas. And about 3 months later, I was transferred out to Midland Army Airfield out in Midland and Odessa, Texas area. And I was working on a plane out there one day, and the commander and the first sergeant drove up in the staff car and says, "Where's Beall?" Oh boy, what did I do now? Well, I showed up right quickly, and they told me to get in the car. Was going to the orderly room, where they showed me a set of orders where I was being sent to Kelly Field, Texas for pilot training. Made the selection. So I went to Kelly Field, and that was not flight training as such. It was pre-flight training. They tested us on all the math that we had learned in high school, and they give us International Morse Code training. We had to learn to use International Morse Code and other things that determined whether or not we were candidate for pilot training. This took about 6 weeks, as I remember. So I left there. After finishing that, I was selected to go to primary flight training. I finished my primary training and went to Enid, Oklahoma, and got a larger degree of an aircraft, heavier aircraft, and the BT-13 and the BT-9 was the primary aircraft at that location. So finishing that, went to, well, let me back up a moment here. While I was at Enid, I happened to get a 5-day pass, and I went to North Little Rock, and I invited my wife to go to Conway with me on a bus to visit my sister. She was going through teachers college in Conway, and on the way up there I proposed to my wife. And when I got there, my sister had a little blonde, beautiful little blonde teacher lined up for me to meet. Well, needless to say, that part of it fell through, and we stayed there a short time, and we came on back home, and I went back to Enid, finished my basic training there in flight training, and went from there to Houston, Texas for twin-engine pilot training. Finishing that on 12th of October, 1941. And for the graduation ceremonies, my wife-to-be came down to visit. And she and her sister came on the train to Houston, Texas for my graduation. I received my wings there, but I didn't get a commission. I got a staff sergeant rank, which is shown right here. And the reason I didn't get a commission was because I had no college. The Air Force, the Army Air Corps had picked out a system whereby they could use pilots that had no college and give them a staff sergeant rank upon graduating, And so I got that pilot wing under my belt, and we were transferred to Love Field, Texas, Dallas, Texas. And so having been transferred up there, I decided it was time to do something else. So on April the 7th, 1943, I got a 5-day pass and went home, and my wife and I became husband and wife. In January of 1943, I was a co-pilot on a B-17 that we took from Newfoundland to Prestwick, Scotland, across the North Atlantic in January. Very treacherous conditions. The temperature in Newfoundland at that time was about 30 degrees below zero. One of my best buddies attempted to go across, and they hit freezing rain, and they went down, didn't make it. So we had a good flight across. It was something else to look down and see the ocean, first time I'd ever seen it from an aircraft especially. And so we went on into Prestwick and delivered our plane, and we waited about 5 days for the weather to clear up so we could get out. It was fogged in. You could hardly see across the street. The fog was so thick. No airplanes were flying. I don't think the ducks were even flying. So we went to India. And I was based at Kermatola part of the time, and Tesgon. Kermatola and Tesgon were two bases located in the valley, about 147 miles up from Calcutta. And these bases operated the C-54s and the C-87. The C-87 was an airframe comparable to, in fact, it was the same thing as the B-24. The B-24 bomber was quite often used in bombing raids. In fact, the Ploesti oil field raids were done with the B-24 in Europe. And but this the C-87 was a converted B-24. It was equipped with fuel tanks instead of bombs, and we had missions into North China with loaded these C-87s loaded with high octane aircraft fuel, and we delivered that to these bases in northeast China for the B-29s that were to be used in the Japanese raids. They carried the atomic bomb, and they operated out of these bases in northeast China. Other flights that I flew were in the C-54, same as the civilian DC-4. It's a Douglas type aircraft, and these flights were about 4.5 hours long from India to China. By doing so, we had to fly across the Himalaya mountains, which were termed as the hump. A lot of people knew about the Himalaya mountains, but they didn't know about the hump. Well, that's the same thing. We just called it the hump. You had hump pilots and you had valley pilots. The valley pilots couldn't fly the hump because their aircraft wasn't capable of going that high. We had several casualties, but not from guns or anti-aircraft fire, but because of the severe weather. Winds would be so great that the pilots wouldn't believe that they were being blown off course. And they'd be blown off course so badly that they would not believe the instruments that were telling them that the radio station to which they were supposed to fly over was indicated by the compass, the radio compass, which was tuned into a station along the route. Anyway, they'd get lost and go down in the jungles. We lost several planes that way. The worst thing about being over there was being away from my family. And I left the States here in February of 1945, and I returned in November of 1945. My last flight from India to China was conducted in August, if I recall. It was at that time we heard on the radio that the war had been terminated, and this was the best news I'd heard. When I reached our airport where we were supposed to land, I took it upon myself to make a little victory pass over the runway. I came down quite low with all the speed the aircraft was capable of, pulled it up in a nice slow chandelle, and wrapped it around and landed on that same runway that I'd just passed over. And that was the beginning of the close down of my World War II activities. And this is something here that was quite evident that the war with Japan was over. And that having taken place, I got orders to come home, and I returned with an aircraft under my own control. I was the aircraft commander on a C-54 that had 30 aircrew members on it that were also being sent home. My first evaluation of my thoughts to the American public is to realize how grateful you should be and how patriotic you should be to have such a country in which to live. There's no place in the world comparable to the United States. And if we don't protect our freedom, we're going to lose it. There's a lot of things that we have here to be thankful for that other countries don't have. Might say our government is lacking in some aspects, but it's the best government in the country, in the world. And the United States government has been good to me, so I'm grateful. And I would recommend anybody in this country to remember the benefits that we are able to enjoy and take it from there and do the best you can with what you have.
Okay, my dad was Chester Fincher, one of 13 kids, and my mother was Laura, before she married, Laura Tidwell. And she had about 6 or 7 brothers and sisters. Great people both. And he was a super trader. He'd trade anything. And at one time he was a cashier in a bank, and then he moved on and was a Buick dealer in Texarkana, Texas. And then he was making really money in the stock market. And then I can't remember whether it was Black Friday came and wiped him out. So at that point I was about in the 3rd grade, and we moved back to Waldo, and he started farming, which he really liked. And he lived here for the rest of his life. She was probably the disciplinarian of the two, and a wonderful mother. And she catered to her kids to, you know, everything had to be right. I had 4 brothers and sisters, and because she was proud of her children. Yeah. School in Waldo, at the time I thought it was a little dinky school, but it turned out to be excellent. And as a matter of fact, I even took Latin in high school. So I had good teachers, and then I went on from there to 1 year at Southern State College in Magnolia. And then from there I transferred to the university in Fayetteville. And I was there for a few months until I was called to active duty in the Air Force. Yeah, I took the aviation cadet test several months before that, and sort of to my surprise passed the test, and so they said that when we're ready for you, you will call, which they did, and then I went from there to Shepherd Field, Texas. And the first words I heard when I got there is, "You'll be sorry," which I was. In the first 48 hours I was there, I was on KP for 16 hours and washed a mountain of pots and pans. And I threatened to kill, in my mind, I threatened to kill the mess sergeant, because about 3 o'clock in the morning I went out and sat out on the steps outside and fired up a cigarette. And he walks up and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm smoking a cigarette." He said, "Come with me." And we went outside between 2 L's of the building, and there was a mountain of tin cans there, big jumbo cans. And he said, "Now I'll show you how to do this." He gave me a meat cleaver, awful tempting, but he said, "You cut one end out like this and turn it over and cut the other end out, and then you flatten your cleaver and smash it flat." And so I did that for the rest of the night. So it was quite an experience. Oh, I had a great crew. Bombardier was what we call a Georgia cracker. His name was Hobson. Sometimes he's prone to drink a little too much, but we all did that. So, and the navigator was Wilhelm Locke, who I said was a German. And then I was the first pilot, and Fraser was the co-pilot. And then what they call the crew chief was a boy named Hodell from Kentucky. He operated the top turret. And then on back a little farther was the radio operator, Richard Amsel from Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania, and he was a great guy, and he was a master at imitating an English accent. It's one of those things, you know. And the ball turret gunner, who just died in California not very long ago, we called him Sally, but his name was Salvador Terrazas. He was a Mexican descent, and just fit into that ball turret and did wonderfully. And let's see, the tail gunner was a Cajun, Paul C. Blanchard from Thibodaux, Louisiana. To tell you what kind of character he was, he and I were walking down the street one night in Tampa, Florida, and here comes a chicken colonel, and of course I saluted smartly to the colonel, and Blanchard says, "Hi, partner." Well, the colonel came unglued, and he worked us over for a considerable time and suggested that I teach a man under my command to salute especially colonels. So it was a good experience, good crew. Yeah. When I walked up to it, it was so big compared to the little twin-engine plane I'd been flying in advanced training that it just struck me that I couldn't get that off the ground. And but it was a magnificent airplane. Just it was one of the first bombers. B-24 was in that same category, but that had a turbo supercharger that permitted it to get to high altitude, like 27,000 feet, which is usually where we bomb from. And it was first invented by, I think, a metallurgist. He came up with a bunch of metals combined that could stand the extreme revolutions per minute. And so, in fact, it was so powerful it could blow an engine if you turned it up too much. But just an overall, had Wright cyclone engines, and which I can still recognize the sound anywhere. And just a magnificent airplane. Only bad thing I can think of is I would have hated to have been in the ball turret, because if you lost hydraulic and electrical and you had to make a crash landing, the ball turret gunner was just out of luck unless the position of the ball was in such a place that he could get out inside the airplane. Otherwise, he was doomed. And so that happened a time or two. Not to me, but it was just it almost unreal. It would just keep on flying in spite of all the damage. Yeah. As long as you were busy and occupied with whatever conversation with someone else, or if you had a particular thing you had to do, your mind was engaged, so to speak, and you might not have time to think about, I'm going over here and I'm going to fly this airplane over Germany, and I could and according to the statistics, there's a good chance I'll be shot down. And later on, after I got overseas, they call that sweating a mission. Some men sweated a mission terribly bad. Some held it in and didn't. Of course, all of them were scared. If they weren't scared, they were fools. Well, my first mission is my crew and I flew with an experienced pilot as sort of a break-in type of thing. And we went to Cologne, Germany, and we bombed. Our mission was to bomb the bridge that crossed the Rhine, and one end of it was at the massive Cologne Cathedral. And our mission was to take out the bridge but not take out the cathedral. And through a piece of luck or talent or something, we got the bridge but not the cathedral. And it was 60 below zero outside air temperature over Cologne. And flak was pretty bad. It's mainly an 88 millimeter German anti-aircraft gun. They had bigger guns than that, but the 88 was more effective, and that's what they used mostly. But it'd be a black puff, and of course it'd be dense all around you, and you could not deviate your course. You couldn't. You were past what's called the IP, the initial point where you set up for a bomb run, usually about 50 miles from the target. So you couldn't take any kind of evasive action. And if you got hit, you just got hit, because you couldn't. You had to stay in that same pattern regardless of the flak. And we were past the IP, and this pilot that was flying that day said, "You take it." And I took over, and he reached under his seat and pulled out a big old heavy flak jacket, and he draped that over his body in front, and then he reached somewhere else and got a tin helmet. And it came down clear. He couldn't hardly see out from under the thing, you know. And I happened to think it was a little bit funny, but it wasn't about 2 minutes later, because I saw a big black puff down below us, and then I saw another one up above us, out to the right wing, and then the next one was just right off the wingtip. And so that's when any amusement disappeared rapidly. But we went on, bombed the target, and then the second mission, we got in bad trouble. As I recall, it was Ludwigshafen, I believe. And but anyway, we got an engine shot out over the target, and shot the hydraulic system out, and couldn't feather the prop. So the prop was windmilling, which is sort of like having two engines out if they're feathered, you know. Terrible vibration. Sometimes in that situation the prop will shear off. Been known to come through the airplane. So, but anyway, I had to decide whether to fly to Switzerland, was nearby, whether to fly to Switzerland, bail out, and be interned for the rest of the war, or whether to try to make it back to England. So I decided to try to make it back to England. And And somebody, a friend of mine, he said when I got out of the airplane, he said, "You're crazy, SOB." Made me instantly mad because I was already a nervous wreck anyway. And then he laughed, and I knew then what he was saying. He was saying, "Boy, you ought to be in Switzerland enjoying life rather than flying that airplane back." But, well, we went to briefing, and it was kind of dramatic. They had a drape over the screen up there, which contained a huge map of Germany, and everybody was, of course, anxious to find out where the target was. And finally, the operations officer pulled the shade up, and there was a red line going in and another color going out. But it was quite dramatic of all the groans, and if it was to Berlin or Hamburg or Bremen or one of those places, one of those bad places, well, there was just an awful lot of noise coming from everybody. Some of our missions were 10 hours in the air, and flying formation is exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. The co-pilot didn't fly formation too well, so I had to do most of it. And if your left wing, for example, gets in the prop wash of a plane ahead of you, well, it takes terrific strength in that arm to control the control column, the wheel. And but the reason for the formation, of course, is protection of all those guns. You can imagine 12 50 calibers in one airplane and multiply that by 12, and that's terrible firepower. And the other thing was bomb pattern on the ground. And of course the northern bomb site was used. And I don't know, you probably know that, but the bomb site itself and the autopilot in the airplane were engaged together. And when the bombardier looked through the scope, if the crosshairs on the target drifted left, well, you take a knob and move it back to on target, and the plane will automatically correct the course, up or down, left or right. And then when you got to where it was stable, stayed on target, or you went ahead and the bombs would automatically drop out when the time came. And, we carried RDX bombs, which were GP bomb was a general purpose bomb, and an RDX bomb was more powerful, much more sensitive. If it dropped out of the bomb bay sitting on the ground, it'd probably go off, even if the pins were still in it. So, in fact, we lost a crew that way on base. They were loading the bomb bay, and one of them got loose and dropped, and I forget how many men it killed. And of course it crossed your mind when you see a B-17 shot out of the sky. it really looks, unless he's very close on you, it looks kind of like a toy filtering down in a spin, you know, in a flat spin. Looks sort of like, impresses you as a toy airplane. And it's sad sight seeing it was, of course, always we tried to count the chutes, if any, that came out. I don't ever remember anywhere all 9 chutes got out. It was hard for a pilot to get out because it was understood that the pilot stayed in the airplane until all the men got out. And pilot that was jumping out had to go down a little flight of stairs down into the nose, almost into the nose, and open a little scuttle hole and fall out it. But it was a sad sight to see a plane go down. One of the worst that impressed me most, that last mission to Pilsen, Czechoslovakia, the English or somebody fouled up and let the citizens that worked in the Skoda works let them know that we were coming and for them to get out of there. Everybody knew that it was the very last mission the 8th Air Force would fly. And we made it through the target. The flak was heavy. I guess they rolled railroad cars in there. Flak was extreme. We made it through. Of course, we nearly always had damage, unless it was a milk run. But we made it through, and I told my co-pilot to take over, and I was looking out the left window at a squadron dropping, and all of a sudden one of them got a direct hit on the left wing, looked like around the number 1-2 engines. It flamed up high in the air, and he started down at a pretty good angle, and he lost maybe 4,000 feet, something like that. And then he got going fast enough that the fire went out. Of course, we were watching closely. And then when he leveled off, that wing just fell off. Looked like slow motion. But I just thought that poor guy went through all this business and then the last mission. And there weren't, I forget how many chutes there were, but of course, when he did that, it rolled over upside down and went in a spin. But I think there were maybe 2 or 3 chutes, but that was the saddest thing I ever saw. But later on, of course, it settled down, and when we got ready to come home, well, I flew over to Wales for a briefing, and I had 10 ground crew people on the plane, as well as my crew. And so from Wales, we flew to Reykjavik, Iceland, and refueled and spent maybe a couple, 3 hours sleeping in a little old shack out by the runway. And then we took off. We took off from Reykjavik about midnight. It was still light, enough that you could see good. And then we flew across the tip of Greenland and continued on to Goose Bay, Labrador, and landed there for refueling and something to eat. And from there we flew to Bradley Field, Connecticut. And everybody got out and kissed the USA. Yeah, it was quite a demonstration. He's glad to be home.